So you know that feeling when you wake up, right? The alarm goes off and you just stare at the ceiling.
Yeah, that absolute heaviness.
Exactly. I mean, you have a full day ahead of you. You've had a decent night's sleep. Maybe you even have a nice cup of coffee waiting for you in the kitchen. But you feel absolutely zero drive to get out of bed and tackle even like the simplest tasks.
It is an incredibly common experience. And yet, it's one that carries an immense amount of silent shame for most people. We tend to internalize that lack of energy as a character flaw.
Oh, absolutely. The culture we live in certainly reinforces that. If you're lacking motivation, the immediate messaging you receive is, well, you're lazy, or you're in a psychological slump, or you simply lack discipline and just need to, grind harder.
Right, the whole hustle culture thing.
Yeah. But today we are going on a mission to completely dismantle that narrative. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are looking into a massive silent epidemic in the modern world, which is the chronic cellular loss of motivation.
And we are not talking about some vague psychological funk today, just to be clear.
No, not at all. Based on the sources we're analyzing today, we're exploring the actual clinical biology of drive.
Yeah.
And we are going to look at the exact protocols required to reset your brain's dopamine baseline.
Which is such empowering knowledge, because once you understand the actual cellular reality of what is happening inside your nervous system, you can stop, fighting yourself. You start treating the system mechanically rather than morally.
So if you are listening to this right now and you've been feeling completely drained, unable to find the drive to do the things you know you should be doing, I want to speak directly to you. It is not your fault. By the end of this deep dive, you're going to have a clinical understanding of your own neurochemistry and, more importantly, a zero-cost, highly actionable toolkit to actually fix it.
Yeah, you really can fix it.
But to solve the problem, we first have to fundamentally correct what society consistently gets wrong about dopamine itself.
Right.
Because you can't fix a biological machine if you're mislabeling its most important fluid.
Right. No, you can't. And we really need to retire the phrase, the pleasure molecule.
Yes, please.
I mean, the way mainstream culture talks about dopamine is the reward itself. The actual feeling of satisfaction is just structurally incorrect.
Dopamine is fundamentally a chemical, and by that I mean a distinct substance controlling biological processes that acts as the molecule of pursuit.
Pursuit.
Right, exactly. It's the chemical of craving, ambition, and forward motion. It's the neurochemical that makes you look at a goal across the room or, across a year and gives you the physical and mental energy to actually move towards it.
So to use an analogy, it's the drive to get off the couch, put on your shoes, and walk to the bakery to get the cake. It isn't the feeling of the frosting on your tongue.
That is the perfect way to look at it. It is the anticipation. And to truly understand motivation, we have to look at how this operates at a cellular level in the brain, which is the organ controlling our thoughts and feelings. We have to distinguish between two completely distinct dopamine states in your system, your baseline and your peaks. Yeah, I was reading through the clinical breakdowns in our sources, and this distinction between the baseline and the peaks, it kind of shifted my entire perspective. So let's start with the baseline. What are we actually talking about when we say baseline dopamine?
So your baseline is the steady, continuous amount of dopamine circulating in your neural pathways at any given moment. Think of it as the idle speed of an engine.
Okay.
This baseline dictates your general level of energy, your resting mood, and your daily readiness to take action. It's always there, humming in the background. Now, peaks, which scientists actually call phasic spikes, are entirely different.
Right.
These happen when you achieve a major goal or when you experience something highly stimulating. You get this sudden, sharp release of dopamine that shoots well above that baseline.
And building on that engine analogy, this brings us right to the toxic self-improvement myth I mentioned earlier. This pervasive idea that if you just have enough willpower, you can conquer the world, even if your baseline is entirely depleted. Our sources made it so clear. Willpower is a biologically exhaustible resource. It's managed by the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah, and it is heavily reliant on the fuel available in the system.
Right. So trying to push an exhausted nervous system with sheer willpower is literally like trying to drive a high-performance vehicle with no fuel in the tank.
Exactly.
You can slam your foot on the gas pedal all you want. You can grip the steering wheel until your knuckles turn white. But if the tank is empty, the car isn't moving, you're just burning out the engine.
And pushing harder in that state just leads to deeper clinical burnout because you're demanding output from a system that lacks the basic neurochemical currency to provide it. You're fighting against your own neurochemistry.
Which is a losing battle.
Totally. In that moment of intense lethargy, you don't need more willpower. You need to understand why the tank is empty in the first place.
Yeah.
And how to heal your dopamine receptors so that motivation arises naturally again.
Which opens up the massive underlying question here. Why is the fuel tank, your dopamine baseline, suddenly so empty in the 21st century? Because, we have our basic survival needs met, we have unprecedented comfort, yet our collective drive is just plummeting. What is draining the tank?
The answer lies in the specific environment we've built around ourselves. We are utterly surrounded by hyper-palatable stimuli.
Yeah.
Endless social media scrolling, consuming highly refined sugars, watching rapid-fire, heavily edited entertainment. All of these activities cause massive, unnatural spikes in dopamine. We're constantly triggering those phasic peaks without exerting any real effort.
We're basically getting the neurochemical payout for free, just by swiping a thumb or opening a new tab.
Right. And the brain is a highly adaptive system that prioritizes balance, or homeostasis. When you constantly flood the synaptic clefts with massive dopamine spikes from these artificial sources, the brain registers that neurochemical overload almost like a toxicity.
Wow, like a poison.
Yeah. To protect itself and regain balance, it initiates a physical adaptation called receptor downregulation.
I want to pause here because this is like the core of the issue. Receptor downregulation isn't just some psychological phase. What is physically happening in the neural pathways when this occurs?
The neurons actually pull their dopamine receptors inward. They retreat from the surface of the cell.
Wait, literally physically moving away?
Yes, physically. They reduce the number of active receiving stations available. They do this to protect the cell from being overstimulated by that constant flood of dopamine we just talked about. But here's the critical consequence. As your active receptors decrease, your overall dopamine baseline effectively plummets.
Because the spikes are so artificially high and so frequent, the brain just shuts down its own sensitivity to compensate.
Yes. And suddenly, the everyday tasks that used to feel perfectly fine, doing the laundry, working on a complex project, going to the gym, just reading a book, they no longer provide enough chemical stimulation to even register.
You don't make you care.
Exactly. You feel lethargic and uninspired, not because you're lazy, but because you have artificially exhausted your own neurobiology. You've burned out the receivers. Let me give you an analogy. Think about it like an acoustic volume dial at a massively loud rock concert.
Okay.
If you're standing right next to the speakers and the music is absolutely deafening, your ears are going to physically adjust to the sheer volume of the environment to protect your hearing. While you're in that front row, if the person next to you tries to whisper a brilliant, fascinating idea into your ear, you aren't going to hear a single word.
Because your ears are completely overwhelmed by the baseline volume of the environment.
The brain operates in the exact same way with dopamine. That deafening rock concert represents our modern digital lifestyle. The constant pinging of notifications, the artificial lights, the endless stream of algorithmic short-form videos. It is a deafening neurochemical environment.
And the soft whisper represents your normal, healthy, everyday goals. Engaging in deep work, going for a quiet walk in nature, having a slow conversation with a friend.
Precisely. Because our brains are trapped in this constant rock concert of artificial stimulation, they turn down their internal volume dial to survive the noise. That is receptor downregulation in action. It makes you completely deaf to the whisper of everyday life.
So you feel absolutely nothing when you try to engage with subtle, healthy rewards because your volume dial is turned all the way down to 0. But this raises a practical hurdle. I'm thinking about you listening right now. How can you possibly fight this when the impulse is so deeply hardwired into our environment? I define impulse here as that sudden, unreflective urge to act. And it really is an autonomic urge. The second there's a lull in a meeting or you're waiting in line at the grocery store, you feel that massive impulse to reach into your pocket and pull out the screen. How do we step out of the rock concert when the speakers are physically glued to our hands?
That is the core challenge of the modern era. The only way to hear the whisper again is to deliberately leave the arena. You have to step into a quiet room and allow those neurochemical receptors time to recover and regain their sensitivity. We have to actively upregulate the receptors so they migrate back to the surface of the cell.
And we aren't just going to leave you depressed about the state of modern technology. The sources we reviewed outline 3 elite zero-cost protocols designed to help you step into that quiet room and reset the baseline. So let's look at Protocol 1, the first hour ambient light and digital fast.
This focuses entirely on the critical first 60 minutes of your day. How you wake up dictates your neurochemical rhythm for the entire next 16 hours.
So I'm assuming rolling over, grabbing the phone off the nightstand, and checking emails or social media with one eye open is completely counterproductive.
It is perhaps the most damaging thing you can do to your baseline. When you look at a highly stimulating screen in bed, you're blasting your brain with unearned dopamine spikes before you have even stood up. You're throwing yourself straight into the front row of the rock concert the literal second you gain consciousness.
So if my phone is the source of the unearned spikes, I need to keep it out of the bedroom entirely. What does the actual optimal first hour look like based on the clinical data?
The protocol demands a strict screen-free first hour. You commit to 0 digital screens for the first 60 minutes. Furthermore, you need to walk outside within 20 minutes of waking up and allow natural sunlight into your visual field for at least 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, I understand the screen-free part that stops the artificial spikes, but why is the natural sunlight so crucial to this specific dopamine equation?
Early morning sunlight exposure triggers a healthy natural release of cortisol. Now, cortisol often gets a bad reputation in wellness circles as purely a stress hormone, but a morning pulse of cortisol is a fundamental biological requirement. It acts in perfect harmony with your dopamine system.
Really? Cortisol helps dopamine?
Yes, that cortisol pulse clears out residual sleepiness, aligns your circadian clock, and sets the timing for dopamine synthesis later in the day. It provides sustained, calm focus.
So you're setting the baseline naturally with biology, rather than artificially spiking it with a glowing rectangle. That makes total sense. Now let's move to Protocol 2, the microfasting block. This is about deliberately constructing that quiet room every single day, beyond just the morning.
Exactly. The protocol suggests carving out a strict 2-hour window daily where you completely eliminate all hyper-palatable stimuli.
2 hours, completely screen-free every day. I'll play devil's advocate here for a modern professional. That sounds nearly impossible. How does someone actually integrate a 2-hour digital fast into a 9-to-5 workflow where your boss expects a reply on Slack within 5 minutes without getting fired?
Well, it's a vital distinction to make. This is a fast from hyper-palatable stimuli, not necessarily all productive output. You can absolutely engage in work. Working on a challenging project, reading documents, writing code. These require effort and do not artificially spike dopamine in the same way an algorithm does.
Oh, okay. I see.
During this 2-hour block, you're eliminating the easy escapes. No social media tabs open in the background, no television, no processed sugary snacks, no checking the news feed every 10 minutes. Acceptable activities are work, reading physical books, walking, face-to-face conversation.
So it's about removing the unearned spikes. You're allowed to exert an effort, but you're starving the system of the cheap thrills.
Yes. By consistently removing that deafening noise for a dedicated period every day, you give your dopamine receptors a safe environment to upregulate. Without the constant flood of cheap dopamine, the brain realizes it's safe to increase receptor sensitivity again. The volume dial starts to turn back up, and normal, healthy activities begin to feel rewarding once more.
I think the hardest part about implementing this is confronting our own internal narratives. We constantly tell ourselves that checking our phone during a lull is just a bad habit we've picked up, and by habit I mean a settled practice that's hard to give up. But looking at the mechanisms we just discussed, it's really not just a habit, is it?
Far from it. It's a neurochemical dependency on a highly engineered spike. It is a constant, unearned reward loop. It's a biological compulsion driven by a downregulated system desperately seeking its next hit of stimulation just to feel normal.
So if we're successfully fasting from these artificial rewards using the first 2 protocols, how do we properly reintroduce rewards without just ruining our baseline all over again? Because, life can't just be an endless monk-like fast.
No, of course not. And this brings us to Protocol 3, which is where the real transformation happens. The first 2 protocols are about subtraction, removing the bad stimuli to stop the damage. Protocol 3 moves us to active addition.
Okay.
Addition.
Right.
We are actively rewiring the brain to build a massive, robust foundation of natural drive. This is called effort-reward coupling through deliberate discomfort.
We really need to rethink what a reward actually means in biology. We've been conditioned to view a reward, which should be something given in exchange for good behavior or effort, as something you just get to have, like streaming 3 hours of television. But biologically, a reward is supposed to be the neurochemical payout for hard physical or mental effort.
The modern equation has been completely inverted. For millions of years of human evolution, you had to expend massive amounts of physical or mental effort to secure a reward. You had to hunt, you had to forage, you had to build shelter. The dopamine was released in anticipation of the reward, attaching itself to the effort of survival. Today, technology gives you the reward without requiring any of the effort. Protocol 3 is about reversing that equation back to its natural state. We must attach the dopamine release to the friction itself.
What does that look like practically? Because I was reading this section in our sources on deliberate, acute physical discomfort, and the examples are intense. We are talking about taking a 90-second cold shower first thing in the morning, or doing an intense, exhausting session of cardiovascular exercise before you allow yourself to consume your morning coffee or sit down for breakfast.
The sequence is the key there. You force the body through a significant challenge first. You engage in the friction before you consume the reward.
I have to push back a little on the cold shower specifically. 90 seconds under freezing water first thing in the morning sounds like a fantastic way to just make yourself miserable.
It's not easy, no.
How does freezing water actually translate to clinical motivation at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? What is happening at the cellular level?
It comes back to our evolutionary survival mechanisms. When you willingly subject yourself to acute, intense physical stress, like freezing water or a heavy cardio session, your sympathetic nervous system engages. Your brain registers the environmental challenge. In response, it triggers a release of dopamine and epinephrine into the bloodstream.
Okay.
But unlike the fast, cheap spike you get from social media, which crashes 10 minutes later and leaves you depleted, the dopamine release from deliberate discomfort is slow and sustained.
Oh, so it changes the baseline itself.
Yes. The biological half-life of that specific release takes hours to clear. So you aren't just getting a peak, you are elevating the entire floor of your dopamine system for the rest of the day. By leaning into the friction early, you build a towering natural foundation of drive and energy that carries you through complex cognitive tasks hours later.
You are quite literally putting the fuel back in the tank by proving to your nervous system that you can handle the effort. When I step back and look at these 3 protocols together, it paints such a clear picture. If you take anything away from this deep dive, let it be this realization. You are not fundamentally lazy. If you're struggling with motivation, you are simply operating a brilliant, ancient biological machine in a modern environment it was absolutely never designed to navigate.
It's a profound evolutionary mismatch. Our brains are working exactly as they were designed to work, but they are reacting to an entirely unnatural set of inputs.
But by understanding these inputs, by taking control of these stimuli, you can actively heal your neural pathways.
Yes. To quickly recap the journey we've mapped out today. First, remember that dopamine is the molecule of pursuit and craving, not the molecule of pleasure and reward.
It's the fuel for the journey, not the destination.
Second, the modern digital rock concert you live in forces your brain into receptor downregulation. It physically turns down your brain's volume dial to protect itself, which robs you of your natural drive for everyday tasks.
And third, you have the specific tools to fix it. The 3 elite protocols. The morning sunlight exposure and screen fast to set your neurochemical rhythm with cortisol. The daily 2-hour microfast from hyper-palatable stimuli to let your receptors safely upregulate in a quiet room. And finally, deliberate discomfort like a cold shower or intense cardio before your rewards to actively trigger a slow, sustained rise in your dopamine baseline.
The neuroplasticity of the human brain is a remarkable thing. Your drive is not permanently lost, no matter how burnt out you feel right now. It is simply waiting to be reclaimed. You have the mechanical ability to reset the system.
I love that phrasing. Your drive is waiting to be reclaimed. And before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today. We've talked deeply about neurochemistry, about receptors, and about practical daily protocols. But if your dopamine baseline dictates your energy, your motivation, and your fundamental ability to achieve complex long-term goals, then taking control of your daily stimuli isn't just a matter of personal self-improvement or productivity.
No, the implications go far beyond the individual.
Think about the broader environment we've been discussing. What if modern technology has essentially monetized your dopamine receptors? What if the massive algorithmic digital economy we interact with every day runs entirely on draining your biological fuel tank to keep you engaged? If that is true, then by reclaiming your biological baseline using these protocols, you aren't just getting your personal motivation back so you can do the dishes or finish a work project. You are actually staging a quiet neurochemical rebellion against the entire modern digital economy.
It reframes the whole concept.
Yeah.
You are taking your attention and your biological drive back from the systems expressly designed to harvest them.
So tomorrow morning, when the alarm goes off and you wake up staring at the ceiling, feeling that heavy lack of drive, remember the fuel tank. Remember the rock concert. And most importantly, remember that you have the power to step into the quiet room, heal the machine, and rebel.